with getting us into David anointed as king and the death of Asahel. But anyway, this week we're going to be in chapter 3 and 4 of 2 Samuel. So chapter 3 and 4, 2 Samuel. Okay. So who's the king over Judah now? Who we've been talking about? David. Okay. Who's the king over Israel? Ishbosheth. Correct. Okay. And then we got actually Jason finished right at chapter 2, verse 32. And then I kind of spoiled it by, actually 3 verse 1 goes along with that, the last chapter. But that was the beginning of a long war between those who were loyal to Saul and those loyal to David. As time passed, David became stronger and stronger, while Saul's dynasty became weaker and weaker. So that's what we're going to look at today. Okay, what I did is I got this broke down in every, I went by with the commentary, and it's kind of broken down little sections. So we'll read a little bit, and then we'll discuss what's going on in those little sections. Okay, and I'm going to read the names of David's sons. I've been practicing, so you can see how well I do. I listen first, and then okay. So we'll see how I do. Verse 2. Okay, these are the sons who were born to David in Hebron. The oldest was Amnon, whose mother was Ahinoam. See, good start, huh? And then from Jezreel. The second was, my version says Daniel, but the other is, most of you probably say Kilead, K-I-L-E-A-D, Abi. And then whose mother was Abigail, the widow of Nabal from Carmel. The third was Absalom, whose mother was Maacah, the daughter of Tamar, king of Geshur. The fourth was Adonijah, whose mother was Haggith. The fifth was Shephatiah, whose mother was Abital. Sixth was Ithream, whose mother was Eglah, David's wife. These sons were all born to David in Hebron. Okay. So some say Hebron, Hebron. Do they say Hebron here in Ohio, or is it Hebron? I think everybody says Hebron, okay. But here, according to that, I think it's pronounced Hebron. Okay, so now these first few verses, does anybody know the situations with these 6 sons? You know where, it says who the parents were, parents were, but anybody know the significance? Anything about these 6 guys? No? That's good. They were, I guess, according to, I said it to the commentary, these guys were, in other words, David had too many wives. Okay, so that pretty much sums it up. And these guys were not all good guys. They had some issues. You can look up in the dictionary or commentary, and then you can see examples of what they did, what they were trying to do, and then but the main thing is that David had too many wives, and that was a problem. So, just think. We all have one spouse, just in here, or had one spouse. But just think if you had multiple. Okay. But if they were all like Dave. Okay, well, just think of that. What would be some of the problems, and especially during this time? What would be, and where do these wives come from? So what could be a major issue of David and by picking out all these different wives? An heir? Okay, that's good. I was thinking more negative. What would be one of the biggest things that, Christy? Okay, yeah. So the heirs, that's a good thing. But yeah, that they could pull David away from his God. So does anybody's spouse have a large influence on you, or I know Larry does over you. So, but just think. I mean, if you had so many wives, and then they weren't following God. They had their own gods and they did their own things. So that was one of the biggest issues with David. And plus, going back, it still suggested that it was one man, one woman. So just because this is polygamy. So it really, according to God, it was not, it happened a lot back then, but according to God, this was not a really good idea. So by picking so many wives, and what else would that show for David? Or anybody back then, if they had multiple wives and multiple, what would that look like?
Prosperity.
Yeah, good. Who said that? Back here? Yeah. Well, that's good. Yeah, prosperity, influence, prestige, power. So that was one of the things that was real popular back then. Okay. So anything else on David's 6 sons here? And I know we'll find out more about these guys later on. Okay, verse 6 through 11. As the war between the house of Saul and the house of David went on, Abner became a powerful leader among those loyal to Saul. One day, Ishbosheth, Saul's son, accused Abner of sleeping with one of his father's concubines, a woman named Rizpah, daughter of Aiah. Abner was furious. Am I some Judean dog to be kicked around like this? He shouted. After all I have done for your father, Saul, and his family and friends by not handing you over to David, is this my reward? That you find fault with me about this woman? May God strike me and even kill me if I don't do everything I can to help David get what the Lord has promised him. I'm going to take Saul's kingdom and give it to David. I will establish the throne of David over Israel as well as Judah, all the way from Dan in the north to Beersheba in the south. Ishbosheth didn't dare say another word because he was afraid of what Abner might do. Okay. So do you think the accusations against Abner was true, or do you think it was false, made up? Yeah.
False.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think it was mostly false. He was just trying to get Abner excited here, but he was looking for something against Abner. Because why do you think this was a big deal? Abner knew what was going on, and apparently he knew God's promise for David to be king over Israel. So why would that be an issue for Ishbosheth? Yeah, he's going to lose. He's going to lose his power. He's not going to be king anymore. Okay. But isn't that God's plan all along, that these two kingdoms they were going to be one? So they're going to be united. Okay. Any thoughts over this little section here? Okay. So, going back, why Abner was so furious, this was a really big deal for somebody to be accused of, and especially since this was the daughter. She was this accusation is very severe, is what I was trying to say. So that's why I think Abner was so upset, because I didn't do anything, and this could be, it could really come down on him really hard. But okay, anything else in that section? Okay, verse 17 through 21. Meanwhile, 12 through 16, thank you. Then Abner sent messengers to David, saying, "Doesn't the entire land belong to you? Make a solemn pact with me, and I will help you turn over all of Israel to you." "All right," David replied, "but I will not negotiate with you unless you bring back my wife Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come." David then sent his message to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, "Give me back my wife Michal, for I bought her with the lives of 100 Philistines." Or most versions said the foreskins of 100 Philistines. So Ishbosheth took Michal away from her husband, Palti, some of them say Paoliti or whatever, son of Laish. Palti followed along behind her as far as Bahurim, weeping as he went. Then Abner told him, "Go back home." So Palti returned. Okay, so who's Milcah? Does anybody remember? Okay, and yeah, Saul gave her to David. Yeah, in 1 Samuel. Of course, this would have been years prior. So, but anyway, that's how Milcah comes into the picture. So apparently he really loved her and missed her, even though he had many other wives. But this was part of the deal that for Abner to take care of. Okay. So anybody remember the price of the 100 Philistines? Yeah. Ouch. So yeah, that's a big deal. But then also down in verse 16, Palti followed along behind her as far as Bahurim, weeping as he went. Then Abner told him, "Go back home." So Palti returned. What do you think about that? So what's Milcah been doing? She's married to somebody else. Yeah. So this, I think it's kind of interesting. And then, so she's married somebody else. So Abner's going to take her back, give her back to David. So what about poor Palti? Yeah. So it's interesting that he follows her all the way, and then Abner is like, he's pretty stern, and some commentator said he's not a really nice guy right now. So he told him to go back. So Palti returned. So he just had to, do what he says, and then give up his wife, and then go back home. Okay. Anything interesting there?
Michal was married to David first before she was given to that.
Yeah.
So he was not her first real husband.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, interesting times, huh? So, we don't have, hopefully don't have too much of the stuff going on today. But, of course, strictly against the law. But, so this is the deal. So he's going to give her back to David as part of the deal for helping to get Israel. Okay, verse 17. 17 through 21. Meanwhile, Abner had consulted with the elders of Israel for some time now. He told them, "You have wanted to make David your king. Now is the time. For the Lord has said, I have chosen David to save my people, Israel, from the hands of the Philistines and from all their other enemies." Abner also spoke with the men of Benjamin. Then he went to Hebron to tell David that all the people of Israel and Benjamin had agreed to support him. When Abner and 20 of his men came to Hebron, David entertained them with a great feast. Then Abner said to David, "Let me go and call an assembly of all Israel to support my lord the king. They all made a covenant with you to make you their king, and you will rule over everything your heart desires." So David sent Abner safely on his way. Okay. So what's Abner's role here? And it's interesting that he knows, what's going on, and what's his big role here?
Getting David king.
Okay. Yeah, he's right. He did a lot of negotiation, and it's interesting that. So back in verse 1, David became stronger and stronger while Saul's dynasty became weaker and weaker. So I don't know how much time this was. I think but anyway, Saul's kingdom was dwindling, and then David's was rising. So do you think that made a difference in the rest of the tribes of Israel saying like, okay, and how did Abner say we wanted this done? How urgent?
As soon as possible.
Right. Now is the time. Okay. So don't wait any longer. So we're going to do it now. So then they went to David, and then they had a big feast and entertained his men, and then he made a covenant with the king, and then so they pretty much handed everything over to David at this point. Okay, and then so David sent Abner safely on his way. Okay, any thoughts there? I know we're just kind of going through, and it's kind of self-explanatory, and I know there's a lot of history in the background. Go back and read 1 Samuel, and then you'll get a lot of bits and pieces. Okay. So 22 through 27. But just after David had sent Abner away in safety, Joab and some of David's troops returned from a raid, bringing much plunder with them. When Joab arrived, he was told that Abner had just been there visiting the king and had been sent away in safety. Joab rushed to the king and demanded, "What have you done? What do you mean by letting Abner get away? You know perfectly well that he came to spy on you and find out everything you're doing." Joab then left David and sent messengers to catch up with Abner, asking him to return. They found him at the well of Sirah and brought him back, though David knew nothing about it. When Abner arrived back in Hebron, Joab took him aside at the gateway as if to speak with him privately, but then he stabbed Abner in the stomach and killed him. Okay. Yeah, poor Abner. Okay, there was a couple things here. So what did Joab accuse Abner of being? A spy. Okay. And then at the end of this, I got a couple of little things about deceitfulness and that's the whole main point of this lesson. But then what? Okay. So Joab was like, "What do you do? We could have Abner." So Joab didn't know what was going on. So he didn't know everything that was just transpired, and then about the deals and everything. So he's like, "What have you done? We could have got him. You're letting him get away." And then So then Joab left, caught up with Abner at the well, and then he went inside, took him aside at the gateway as to speak with him privately, but then he stabbed Abner in the stomach and killed him. Okay, there's one thing. So they're at Hebron. What's the significance about the gateway or the gate to the city? What were they not allowed to do inside the gate, inside the city? What's that?
It's kind of like a sanctuary city.
Yeah, yeah, it's a city of refuge. And then, but the same thing is they can't kill anybody inside the city. So he's got him before in the city, so right outside the gate, and that's where, he took him aside and killed him. Okay. Anything else there? Okay, 28 through 30. When David heard about it, he declared, I vow by the Lord that I and my kingdom are forever innocent of this crime against Abner, son of Ner. Joab and his family are guilty ones. May the family of Joab be cursed in every generation with a man who has open sores or leprosy, or who walks on crutches, or dies by the sword, or begs for food. So Joab and his brother Abishai, something like that, Abishai, killed Abner because Abner had killed his brother Asahel at the Battle of Gibeon. Okay, so that's what we talked about last week. Okay, so any thoughts? What about the curse on Joab's family? Okay. Okay, so David was pretty upset, and somebody's going to pay for this. So it's pretty neat about the descriptions of, somebody's going to have these diseases or die by the sword or begs. So, right, yeah, they're not going to live well. Okay, 31 through 39. Then David said to Joab and all those who were with him, tear your clothes and put on burlap or sackcloth, mourn for Abner, and King David himself walked behind the procession to the grave. They buried Abner in Hebron, and the king and all the people wept at his graveside. Then the king sang this funeral song for Abner. Should Abner have died as fools die? Your hands were not bound. Your feet were not chained. No, you were murdered, the victim of a wicked plot. All the people wept again for Abner. David had refused to eat anything all day of the funeral, and now everyone begged him to eat. But David had made a vow, saying, may God strike me and even kill me if I eat anything before sundown. This pleased the people very much. In fact, everything the king did please them. So everyone in Judah and all Israel understood that David was not responsible for Abner's murder. Then King David said to his officials, don't you realize that a great commander has fallen today in Israel? And even though I am the anointed king, these two sons of Zeruiah, Joab and Abishai, are too strong for me to control. So may the Lord repay these evil men for their evil deeds. Okay. So all the people mourned for Abner. And David said he was a great warrior and a great commander. And what about favor of David here? What about the favor of David and the people? The favor of the people. Is it good or bad?
David's a good politician.
Yeah.
So he wasn't used to seeing mourning in this, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think we read these stories, we want to find a good guy. There's no good guys. David's not a good guy.
Yeah.
Abner's not a good guy. Joab, they're all bloodthirsty politicians
Mm-hmm.
who kill you to get their way. No, there's only one hero in the story, that's God.
Yeah.
Somehow God is working his will through these sinners.
Yeah. Yep. and it's neat, and we'll get into 4 here real quick, but it's, you don't want to spoil it, but David was always thinking the best of people. He could always, I don't know if anybody ever noticed that, but, Abner was a great commander, even though he had issues. Even with, about any others, but he still kind of looked at the good side of these guys, even though they had many issues. So I think that says a lot about David's character. Okay, so the people were all pleased once they, with everything that David was doing. And then it was kind of interesting there back in 39 about his concerns about Joab and Abishai for me to control. And then again, like Mark said, so may the Lord repay these evil men for their evil deeds. So he just turned everything over to God, since he can't do a whole lot, or feels like he can't do a lot. He just turns everything over to God. Okay. Alrighty. We'll go into chapter 4. When Ishbosheth, too many H's in there, Saul's son heard about Abner's death at Hebron, he lost all courage, and all Israel became paralyzed with fear. Now, so what about, when we just read about that, David was worried about them, but here they're afraid. They've seen what's happened and stuff, so they're afraid, and David doesn't know that yet. Now, there were 2 brothers, Benaiah and Rechab, who were captains of Ishbosheth's raiding parties. They were sons of Rimmon, a member of the tribe of Benjamin, who lived in Baroth. The town of Baroth is now part of Benjamin's territory because the original people of Baroth fled to Gittaim, where they still live as foreigners. Saul's son Jonathan had a son named Mephibosheth, who was crippled as a child. He was 5 years old when the report came from Jezreel that Saul and Jonathan had been killed in battle. When the child's nurse heard the news, she picked him up and fled, but as she hurried away, she dropped him, and he became crippled. Okay, so everybody remember Mephibosheth's story? Okay. So she dropped him, he became crippled, and this is Jonathan's son. Okay. So what's that? Okay, 5 through 7. One day Rechab and Baanah, the sons of Rimmon from Baroth, went to Ishbosheth, something like that. It's getting harder and harder to say. A house around noon as he was taking his midday rest. The doorkeeper who had been sifting wheat became drowsy and fell asleep, so Rechab and Baanah slipped in past her. They went into the house and found Ishbosheth sleeping on his bed. They struck and killed him and cut off his head. Then, taking his head with them, they fled across the Jordan Valley through the night. When they arrived at Hebron, they presented Ishbosheth's head to David. Look, they explained to the king, here is the head of Ishbosheth, the son of your enemy Saul, who tried to kill you. Today the Lord has given my lord the king revenge on Saul and his entire family. Okay, but David said to Rechab and Baanah, the Lord who saves me from all my enemies is my witness. Someone once told me Saul is dead, thinking he was bringing me good news, but I seized him and killed him at Ziklag. That's the reward I gave him for his news. How much more should I reward evil men who have killed an innocent man, who in his own house, on his own bed? Shouldn't I hold you responsible for his blood and rid the earth of you? Okay, so David ordered his young men to kill them, and they did. They cut off their hands and their feet, hung their bodies beside the pool in Hebron. Then they took Ishbosheth's head and buried it in Abner's tomb in Hebron. I know I didn't know what the significance was of cutting off the hands and the feet. And then usually they cut off their head or something, but then they hung them on the wall for everybody to see.
Sounds like to me David did not have much control over his own military. Because it sounds like to me that they were trying to please him, but he was trying to keep peace
Mm-hmm.
between the families,
Mm-hmm.
and they weren't. Because I mean, he's kind of like an, I mean, the guy cut, supposedly was his enemy, they cut his head off, and he's mad at the guys that cut his head off, who were actually for him. Because he's like, why would you go into somebody's house
Yeah.
and do this?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I was kind of alluding to earlier about David's, what happened when they killed Saul? He took care of that because Saul was God's anointed. You don't do God's job, in other words. So that's what he's saying here again, too. So you don't do God's job. That's up to him to take revenge. And that's why I think these guys were punished so severely, because they're taking things into their own hands. And then, so David is not happy. He's not pleased. So he's taken care of, and he mourns. Like Abner wasn't a great guy. Saul wasn't a great guy, and is all part of God's plan. So he still respects them, and mourns for them, and he did care for them, even though they all wanted to kill him. Okay. Good. Anything else in that section there? Okay. We're good. On the application on our little handouts, they talk about deceit. So was there any deceit going on here in this story? Yeah, there's a couple, yeah. But anyway, so what about, I looked that up, deceit. It's an act of intentionally propagating belief of things that are not true or not the whole truth. Okay, so here, about sleeping with the concubine, that was false. And then what was the other one? About Abner being a spy. So, they're being deceitful, trying to get their way, but then, of course, it didn't work out for them. Okay, so what about today? Do we know anybody that's deceitful, or do we see deceitfulness in the world today? Does anybody have agendas that, okay, it's all over the place. So it's, so it's still very prevalent today.
Can I go back here just for a moment?
Yeah.
And it's the repetitive nature in the Bible, that the Bible and God tells us if you want to be a leader, you need to be a follower. What is happening here with David is the fact that he is a leader, and then there are those that are supposed to follow. But there are those that are making decisions without consulting. And for that, there is a price to be paid. If we look at life today, if there's not a leader in a family, if there's not a leader in a church,
Mm-hmm.
if there's not a leader in a country, there is loss.
Mm-hmm.
Countries get lost,
Mm-hmm.
churches get lost, families get lost. If one has not learned how to follow, many times that they've not discussed their challenge or something with the leadership, then they either need to step aside or resign those positions. But many times what David is teaching here, even though he may not be a righteous man, he is a man that has authority. And when people are making decisions that are outside that authority, you'll see that all over anything you look at, that David is saying, I am in charge, and you're not. So the decisions he's making may seem awful, but at the same time, if you're allowing things that happen that have not been discussed or agreed upon, then harsh decisions had to be made.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they need to be made in life today.
Mm-hmm. Good, Good. I mean, like I say, that's all down the line, at workplace, like especially family. So there was, and then like I said, if you don't follow those rules or follow whoever's in charge, there's consequences, or should be consequences. So, and one of the commentaries said that, who's our king today? What? Yes. Right, very good. That wasn't a trick question, so okay. But he mentioned that, then who are we following as king? And what are the consequences if we don't follow him as king? Okay, so it's the same thing. We're going to pay, maybe not immediately, but maybe, down the road. But it's, Jesus is our king. He's our example. He's our leader. We learn from him and do what he says. So if we don't do what he says, then that's where the consequences come in. Okay. And then they always have a song in here, but I didn't like their selection, so I found one. I'm bucking don't tell anybody. But anyway, they had angry words and stuff, but I found, and this goes along, it's 394, is To Christ Be True. And I always like to read these, and people can write so much better than, I can, or it's neat to hear people come up with these. But anyway, so he's talking about, being loyal, being true. So Christ be loyal and be true, his banner be unfurled, and borne aloft till it's secured the conquest of the world. To Christ be loyal and be true, he needs brave volunteers to stand against the powers of sin, moved not by frowns or fears. Christ be loyal and be true, in noble service prove your faith and your fidelity, the fervor of your love. So to Christ be loyal and be true, for he will go with you and help you all your conflicts through. To Christ the Lord be true. So I think that song's pretty fittingly. And fidelity, look that up too, and everybody knows what it means, but I always like the dictionary. Faithfulness to a person, cause, or belief, demonstrated by continuing loyalty and support. Okay. So, that's why we're here. Because we're loyal to our King, hopefully, and then, that's why this is a big deal. So, anyway, I thought that song was very fitting. Okay, well, it looks like we're out of time. Any last comments? We're good? Okay, all right, thanks.